Alright guys, so I'm doing a quick simple test. I am checking the ignition coil pattern on this BMW. It's a 13.5 series with the 4-cylinder N20, and like almost all BMWs, they have the coil setup where they are basically like a 2-wire style Ford pencil type coil where you can capture the actual primary signal by tapping into the line. So I've got all 4 tapped in. I do have a misfire, and I will show you that on the scanner. But I just wanted to capture the other cylinders that aren't logging a fault, because the way that I do this with this pattern, I've become familiar with early signs of the failing coil, and hopefully I'll be able to show the portion of the pattern that I look at for early signs of failure, even if they're not currently misfiring. And keep in mind, depending on your scope, you might need to use attenuators on coils like this. Again, when they're let's call it dumb coil, not a smart coil, and because the voltage does spike up. And I've got my trace, or my channels labeled in order, so channels 1, 2, 3, 4 correspond to those cylinders. Okay, so we'll gather that data, and just to show you, and I know it's probably coming off as really loud, but the engine itself is fine. And currently it's not fully missing, and even when I was driving it, it wasn't like a dead whole miss. It was a slight misfire, and I think it could get to the point where it was progressively worse the more of a load I requested. So still not fully dead miss. Let's take a look at the waveform. Alright, so let's see. Basically, where I'd like to look at as far as these type of coils, so blue is 1, 3, 4, 2, and I will show you where I'd like to look at. Let's look at number 1. So the area on these coils for BMWs, I like to look at this portion right here. If it doesn't come down and oscillate, you'll see when they're starting to fail or have failed, they'll do a slope, like a curve or a slope. There's no straight down and there's no oscillations. That's a clear indication of these coils when they have failed or are not showing misfires in a cylinder, but they'll have a small curve and no oscillations, and that's how I can tell ahead of time that those will lead to complete failure, because the pattern is just not correct. So that was 1. Here you can see down and oscillations. That's cylinder 3. Let's see, cylinder 4 comes down, oscillations. And we will touch a little bit on what we are seeing. And then let me just finish off 1, 3, 4, and then here's 2. So it comes down in oscillations. So what I am seeing is not what I was maybe thinking it was going to be, like again, quote unquote simple BMW ignition coil failure. Now let me show you the scan data. So we'll go into data stream, and we'll look for BMW's verbiage, and it's not in this misfire counter deal. Yeah, I'll bring that up just so that you can see, but you have to look at it's either smooth running values or rough running values. Something to that extent is what BMW refers them to, and that's where you need to look at for displays. Again, I have that one brought up to show you that there's no counting there. I've checked already beforehand. What you want to look at and see is their ideal point is 0, as close to 0. Anything that's in a high number range, like cylinder 4, as you can see, is what is going to be identify or signify a cylinder as not running smooth. And you can be in the 1s, maybe 2s, but after that it's a concern. But in that range, not too concerned, especially when you see something like cylinder 4. So it's not a constant dead hole continuous miss. If not, that'd be super high and all the time, and we would truly feel it and experience it if it was like a dead 100% dead miss. And lastly, I think we would see a much different pattern for a complete dead cylinder situation. The one thing now we could look at again and compare is that section of when the spark is traveling. You can see there's a lot of activity there compared to, let's see what this one, compared to that one. That one is trying to just go across. It's not straight across, but it's not like that. Cylinder 4, again, 1, 3, 4, 2. So let's look at number 1. That does have some activity, but let's go across. Let's look at some more. So let's look at cylinder 4 again. Let's call it major activity in that section where the spark should be traveling across the gap. See, that's more of an ideal picture. And so I think we could say we have something going on with cylinder 4. Let's change the time a little bit and add a trigger just for, let's see, a continuous type of picture. Let me change my voltage. Okay, and let me change my time. Okay, so we are on cylinder number 4. Let's pause that. So that one, not too terrible. Let's go backwards. Some activity, but still looking like it's going across. Activity. Let's see. There's a bad one. It's there. So there. So it's continually just not looking too good. Let's change the cylinder. Let's go this guy here. And let's pause that. Okay, so there's that one. Let's go backwards. Definitely less activity. It's just going across as it should. There, it's ideal, perfect. Some flutter there, but most of the time it's an ideal firing picture as it's traveling across that gap. And there was that's cylinder 4 there. Okay, just for giggles, let's go. Let's pick another guy here. Okay, so again that not too bad there. Let's go backwards again. Wow, that's, yeah, ideal. Not too terrible. Obviously more of what you're expecting to see, wanting to see. Definitely very good across the board here for that one. Let's see, I think that's cylinder 3. And let's look at cylinder 1. Actually, that was cylinder, let's see. Yeah, no, the green was number 3. Here's cylinder 1. So it's going across. See, it goes across, it goes across, 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 across. Definitely, those 3 cylinders, more of an ideal type of graph compared to, one last time, let's go to cylinder 4. So yeah, pretty big difference there that our ignition trace is showing us continuously for cylinder 4. Alright, so since monitoring the coils, the primary, didn't tell me basically that it was a coil issue, like a failing coil, as I thought once again, and I'll explain that later. I'm going to move over to just doing a relative compression, as again I normally would do and should do anytime I get a misfiring vehicle. Sometimes, you know, we can, like 4 cylinders, when all coils are facing you, easy to do. You don't always have to go straight forward to a relative compression. But now that one of my tests didn't necessarily yield something I was expecting to see, but it did show some difference in cylinder 4 by looking at that ignition trace. Based off that, I'm going to take a step back again and go with my process, and I'm going to do relative compression while I monitor. I'll have a sync still, obviously, on cylinder 1. I'll watch the battery amps for the starter. I'm going to tap into the intake manifold, and I think for now that's all that I'll watch right now, and I crank no start and watch the relative compression and see where that leads us to. Alright, we will do crank no start, relative compression. Alright, let's see what this looks like. Well, not too much of good news for the customer, it's going to look like. You guys can already tell. We have one that is lower than the rest. This guy, that guy, that guy, and so on. Our intake pulls are pretty much similar. Nothing that's jumping out crazy. But clearly we are having a mechanical issue. Doesn't look like it's going into the intake manifold as far as a mechanical failure, loss of compression, because this here will equate to lower compression compared to the other guys in the engine. So high compression, low, high, 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 low, high, 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 low. That is cylinder 4. We are triggered on 1, so it's 1, 3, 4, 2. 1, 3, 4, 2. Alright, that will show us what we were seeing on the live data, and trouble code wise, it did point to cylinder 4 as having misfires. I'll see if I can bring that up right now. Keep in mind, we just cranked it with the injectors off. So let's see, we're gonna have, I'm sure, some injector codes. So these are the ones that it came in with. So several misfires. So cylinder 4, so it's combustion misfire. Cylinder 4 detected. Sorry, this guy here. And again, damaging exhaust, misfire cylinder 4. And then these are going to be our injector codes. Alright, so trouble code for cylinder 4 misfiring. We saw ignition pattern that had, let's call a lot of activity or flutter in that portion where the spark's supposed to travel from point to point. There was a lot of flutter, if you think about it. That's what led me to do a relative compression to check mechanical, because of that flutter is said to be, in studies and so on and so forth, it is said to be that it's a compression type issue, like air flying past the flame portion, creating instability and not a direct flight point to point with that arc, and so it'll create that flutter. So that's why I went to mechanical from there. I normally would do relative compression, mechanical first, but I was going for, again with this vehicle, was going for what is the common silver bullet of ignition coil failures, which is not the case this time around again. Alright guys, so based off of that mechanical issue we found with relative compression, I've added an exhaust trace in the yellow and then the crankcase pressure trace in the purple. Let's crank it over, see if we can find a fault. Alright, let's take a look. Alright, so without going to great detail, which I still might, all that you need to do is look for an oddball guy to stand out and stand out enough. So what I mean is, like in relative compression, here you need an oddball guy to stand out enough, so that stands out enough compared to the others. So if we go here too, this is the crankcase. Now there is not one that is jumping out and stands out enough compared to the others to dive in deeper and try to dissect a singular faulted anomaly point. There's nothing like that in the crankcase. Now if we look at the exhaust, let's gather a little more. Do we see one that is different compared to the rest? Now there is, for let's call it activity points, 1, 2, 3, 4, so humps, but one is standing out and being different than the other 3, which is this guy here, that there, and that there. That is an identifiable point that stands out from the rest, that we were led to by monitoring this after we found the ignition trace looking faulted. We have a bad exhaust valve on cylinder 4 is what it seems to be looking like. Alright guys, so I will try to explain what is going on. So first foremost, to make it easier for you guys to understand, I've created a math channel. I've inverted channel 4, so we'll move that out. We will come here, concentrate on the inverted trace, and I'll explain. So I've got the rulers up, and this is ignition coil striking on the red, so that is cylinder 1, and we are still on the relative compression, so that is compression peak point for cylinder number 1. Whenever that line is there, and then whenever you see that line, this line, and here, those are peak points of compression for each cylinder. All you have to do is go down the line in fine order. So if this is cylinder 1, this line is peak point of piston traveling up, compression point of cylinder number 3, cylinder number 4, cylinder number 2, cylinder number 1, again there. So as far as what I am getting at, and these are in increments of 180 for this 4-cylinder when spread out into four columns. So our anomaly is right here, and this sensor, when inverted this way, anything that goes up is positive pressure, anything that goes down is negative pressure, like a vacuum. So we have, it goes up, down, down, and then it changes and shoots down. So it shot down into vacuum, and then it went back up. That right there is identifying to us and showing us deep vacuum, way deeper than these other guys. The reason why we have deep vacuum here is because if cylinder 4 went up on compression and peaked out there, and the piston changes direction, comes back down, what's the next event? So if that's the compression, next would be power or expansion, and then it's exhaust. Just before 180, the exhaust valve will open, and that's what we saw right here. So in this area, our exhaust valve opened and then shot down deep vacuum, because once it opened, we were exposed to a deeper level of vacuum in cylinder 4, because there was a void, and it must be a big expansion pocket, and so the void was present, and deep expansion pocket was present because we lost compression. And since we lost compression, then as soon as we're fully exposed to the cylinder from the exhaust valve opening, exposed to it in our exhaust pipe, we are now seeing that deep vacuum from the void in the exhaust expansion pocket. And I'll try to show that. Now, you are saying this is showing us a vacuum when the exhaust valve opened. How are we supposed to know or see or tell that we were bleeding off from our exhaust valve? If we go back here, now again, these lines are when the piston travels up and then down, because we are split in 180 degrees. So the piston number 1 reached top dead center here. Number 3 went from bottom dead center to top. Number 4 from 180 to 360 went from bottom dead center to top dead center. This is the peak for number 4. Remember, 1, 3, 4. So number 4 piston went from here, traveled up, and landed here. Now, what do you see in that column? In our exhaust trace, you see this blip, this activity. Again, if it's going up, it's positive pressure. The fact that we have an anomaly, a blip, in the portion column of when our piston is going upwards to its peak point, and that whole time, all 4 valves are supposed to be closed as it's traveling up in compression, but we have activity in our exhaust waveform pattern because one of the exhaust valves is bleeding off, and we're seeing that here. And so upward travel bleeds off into the exhaust from exhaust valve, we see in our exhaust trace, and then downwards, once we open our exhaust valve, we see and capture in our exhaust trace the deep void that's in the cylinder from a loss of compression. You know, if we just go down the line to prove it out, here it is again. There it is again. There it is again. It's guaranteed. I don't even know what's coming next, but I can guarantee we're going to see it. There we go. There we go. There we go. So that proves out our leaking exhaust valve or a chunk missing. I don't think a chunk is missing. I think we would have less compression. But I could be wrong. It all depends on how much of a chunk would be missing. So we could be bleeding off at the valve sealing area or have a small chunk missing, which again, I think, gut feeling, I'm saying hopefully a valve sealing issue. Also because of how it runs. At idle, I think of just off experience, if we had a chunk missing, it would be more of a more pronounced dead mechanical miss. This one, it's doesn't idle perfect. It has its blips, and it's something you can feel off and on. So that's why I'm believing that it's going to be a valve face sealing issue. So we've proved out, again, through just our exhaust pipe, that we are seeing an issue in the exhaust for cylinder number 4. Now I technically am done. Actually, I was pretty much done after the RC test when it comes to, getting an invoice and an estimate together for our customers. We know we have a mechanical problem. Hey, Mrs. Joe Blow, do you want to put X amount of dollars because this is what it's going to take, so on and so forth. And we literally couldn't have stopped. If we're high production, we've nailed it correctly, move on to the next one. Obviously here, I'm playing around, I'm experimenting, I'm gathering more data, I'm growing my knowledge and sharing it with you guys so you guys can learn. So I'm just going to go in cylinder just to fulfill anyone's curiosity, and maybe I can show you that expansion pocket where it will be deep, and then the point at where the exhaust valve opens, and show you how maybe we can correlate the in-cylinder to the exhaust trace. Okay, so I'm all set up. I'm in cylinder in number 4, and I'm also at the same time inside number 1. That way I can simultaneously with one cranking test show you the difference between 2 cylinders that number 4 should have, and show the deep expansion pocket, and that way we can identify some of those points. This one is cylinder 1. The purple one, I took away the crankcase, and that is now cylinder number 4. So let's go ahead and get it cranking and see what we get. Alright, let's pause this and let's take a look. So, just for starters, if you're not aware, your relative compression will be affected by adding volume to the cylinder like compression hoses. So, you can tell we've got this purple is in cylinder, it's dropped that. This green teal is in cylinder, so it's dropped that peak also. So keep that in mind about relative compression. Don't get lost or confused by that. So we'll throw that up there. We won't need that. Let's bring these together. And let's move up the exhaust first. And I'm not concerned about peak points. That's not where I'm trying to look at and see. So, with this here, let's see. Let's take a look. So, now this has Valvetronic, so it's going to make this a little bit confusing. Because you have this big drop and you have this big drop. That drop is happening in the intake portion just before intake valve closes and shoots off compression. The reason why it does it is because of Valvetronic. It's literally opening the valve there and closing it there, all while in the intake stroke. So I'll show that. Actually, I misspoke with the, it's easier to define the points with the graph. It actually opens it here and closes it here. I've got other videos that help explain this, so on and so forth. Maybe I'll link them up. But let's not get stuck and pay attention at this peak drop, which for both cylinders, we're getting the same, pretty much same levels. So intake portion side of the cylinders, that's the same. So kind of just scratch that. Get that out of your head. Don't look at that. We want to look at the expansion pocket. So this here, we're coming down. Here's expansion all the way there. Here's the green. Comes down. Here's your expansion. Look at the level differences. Let's see if we can try to... So there, let's get a figure for vacuum. So this is for cylinder 1, and then let's get a number for cylinder number 4. Again, it's much deeper because we've got lower compression from bleeding it off in the exhaust, and when it comes down from top dead center, because there was a void, it's going to go into a deeper vacuum. So as far as our numbers go, cylinder 4 has just over 4.5, so about 9 inches, just over 9 inches of vacuum, and then about 4.5 inches on cylinder 1. So there is our difference in expansion pockets. Like I told you, that you can tell and see and pick out just from the exhaust trace. When you see a big vacuum pull in the exhaust trace in one of the portions compared to the rest, that means a cylinder is low on compression. We're proving that out here. Now, let's bring down the exhaust to try to make sense of that. So let me actually bring up the math channel portion. So we're up there. Let's swap out bring you up, and let's go down here. So this is, again, easier on the eyes, less confusion. So if you remember that area I told you, this here is from the exhaust valve opening. So to help eyeball that, let's get this guy gone, and let's bring out a ruler. So this was going into pocket. We lost vacuum pocket as soon as exhaust valve opens. We lose that, but that's where we see it in the exhaust trace. And let's see, right there, like as we said, that point of where it changed direction and shot down into deep vacuum is because the exhaust valve opened and we were exposed to a very deep or much deeper level of vacuum than the other cylinders. As you can see, not so much vacuum, a lot more vacuum. Why? Because this was deep in vacuum, and now the two are tied together, meaning our tailpipe is exposed to in-cylinder pressures because exhaust valve open, and that's what we are capturing. That's identifiable in our exhaust trace. Now the other one was that kind of blip, which is right there. You can see it. It happened beforehand on that exhaust trace in that other peak point, and you can see it's shooting up in compression, and it caused that to occur because we were shooting compression past the exhaust valve. And you can see it again here as it shot up in compression. There it is. Again, shoots up compression. There it is. So two identifiable points in our exhaust trace that tell us the story of what's going on in the engine mechanically, and we can verify that by our in-cylinder pressure readings. And quickly, I'll just show you, since I did speak of it earlier, and to help not confuse you guys. Here is our 4 columns again in our in-cylinder. And this is that peak drop that we saw in all cylinders, or both cylinders. And do not get confused. This vehicle has Valvetronic, which is basically, it controls the lift independently. It has access or ability to do that. And what's happening here is we at this point 360 mark have now began to travel downwards in our intake stroke. So this is expansion stroke, exhaust stroke, intake stroke, compression stroke, all the columns. And in this column of intake, when our piston's traveling downwards, the only way to get this deep in vacuum is to pull against closed valves, against a sealed chamber or cylinder. And we are building down there about 9.5 psi, so that's what, about 19 inches of vacuum during cranking. Now that, on other regular engines, we'll call it, is not normal. You don't gain that much vacuum unless there's a faulted state, and this can mislead you. And so that point where we release vacuum, that's when our intake valve opened. And that's why, because we created a leak and now we're bleeding off, and that can mislead someone into making an incorrect mechanical condition call of the engine. Alright guys, so I hope you guys enjoyed that kind of quick little lesson about engine mechanical pressure readings and waveform and how to analyze it and figure stuff out, so on and so forth. Again, this vehicle came in with a check engine light, misfire codes, not fully missing like a dead hole. And I keep laughing because this vehicle, this is the second time it's here for the same exact symptom of basically a misfire that's not a dead hole. Now, I did do a video on it, and it was a pretty good, awesome video about identifying and picking out the cause of a misfire. That one, if you go back and check it out, I show you steps again about how I went on identifying the cause of the misfires. This time, it comes back for the same symptom, where it runs rough. It's not dead hole type miss. It, random come go type of miss. So you start to question yourself. But just take a step back. Don't get riled up and start shooting from the hip. Just go through a process that you hopefully have made up that you go through so that you don't get lost, don't make the wrong call. And that's what I did here. I tried to assume that we were going to have bad coils, like I actually assumed the first time. It turns out to not be true, so it's something further, and the data just led us from one thing to the other. This one now has gone to the point where we have deep internal mechanical engine failures, and they are going to have to decide what they want to do. But we have undeniable proof in multiple captures and ways that has led us to that, and we are guaranteed on the call that we are making. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you gained something from it and that it helps you guys down the line if you're trying to gain knowledge on pressure readings in cylinder stuff and so on and so forth. So that's all for this one. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. Exhaust valve. Nothing is missing, as you can tell. And then let's see, where's the other one? And here's the other one. We go around, no chunk missing. So it's a valve face sealing issue, like I was kind of predicting, based off of the way the waveforms and stuff appeared. So yeah, nothing missing from exhaust valve. Confirm. It's just a mechanical valve sealing on the face issue. Alright, I hope that comes out good on video, and I hope you enjoyed it.